My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old, and I never thought I'd live to see the day my own family would turn against me. Yet here I was, standing in the middle of my living room, with my daughter-in-law's hand still stinging across my cheek. The sharp sound of her slap echoed in my ears as I staggered back, nearly losing my balance against the wall. For a moment, I froze, not because of the pain, but because of the betrayal. "Get out of this house!" Vanessa spat, her eyes blazing with entitlement as though the walls around us had never been mine. Beside her, my son Daniel didn't even look at me. He just stood there, arms crossed, his jaw set in silent agreement with his wife's cruelty. I pressed my palm against the side of my face, feeling the warmth rising beneath my skin, and I looked at the two of them with disbelief. This was the home I had worked for, the home I had given them, and now I was being thrown out like a stranger. Inside me, anger battled sorrow, but neither won. What rose instead was something colder, sharper, a certainty. They thought I was defenseless, a weak old woman they could bully into submission, but I wasn't weak. As Vanessa's voice rang in my ears, demanding I hand over $50,000 for her ridiculous luxury party, threatening to drain my bank account if I refused, I felt a strange calm settle over me, because what they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that I had been preparing for this moment all along. The silence that followed my refusal was heavier than any sound I had ever known. Vanessa's hand was still trembling from the slap. Her eyes narrowed like she had just conquered something. But she wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. "You think you can just say no to me?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I am your family now, and if you respected me, you'd show it by paying for my celebration. $50,000 isn't much when it's for your son's wife." Her words stung more than her hand. My heart raced, not from fear, but from disbelief. She said those things as if she had earned my respect, as if I owed her something for simply existing in Daniel's life. I stood in the living room I had once decorated for Christmases and Thanksgivings, the same space where Daniel had taken his first steps. And suddenly, I felt like an intruder in my own memories. I turned to Daniel, searching his face for even a flicker of compassion, but he looked at me with a cold detachment I had never seen before. He cleared his throat, then finally spoke. "Mom, stop being dramatic. Vanessa deserves this. If you won't write the check, we'll figure out another way. Don't forget, I know how to access your accounts." The words landed like daggers. It wasn't just Vanessa anymore. My own son was standing against me, threatening me, aligning himself with her greed. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. My breath caught, and I had to steady myself against the back of a chair. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You can't mean that." His jaw tightened. "You've always had money for everything else. Why not for us? Why not now?" A bitter laugh bubbled up from my chest, though it felt more like a sob forced in reverse. "For you?" I said softly. "Or for her?" Vanessa rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "For us? Obviously. Don't make it sound like I'm asking for a handout. This is an investment in family honor. My friends are expecting a certain standard, and you don't want people to think Daniel married beneath him, do you?" Her arrogance was suffocating. For a moment, my vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer pressure of the betrayal crushing down on me. My son's silence beside her said more than words ever could. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't protecting me. He was letting her treat me like an ATM with wrinkles. I straightened my shoulders, willing my spine to hold me up even as my heart threatened to collapse. I had never felt older, but I had also never felt stronger. "You're asking me to give away my dignity," I said, my voice steady now. And I won't. The air grew colder. Vanessa's lips curled into a sneer. Then get out, she hissed. Pack your things and leave. This is our house now. You don't belong here anymore. The audacity of it nearly stole my breath. My house. My years of work and sacrifice embedded in every corner, every brick. And here was this young woman who had contributed nothing but demands, claiming it as her territory. Daniel looked away, avoiding my eyes. That hurt more than anything Vanessa could ever do. He couldn't even meet my gaze. That was the moment I knew something had broken between us, something that might never be the same again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him of the nights I stayed awake at his hospital bed when he was sick as a child, of the double shifts I worked to afford his education, of the sacrifices I made so he would never go without. But the words caught in my throat because I realized they wouldn't matter. He wasn't listening. He didn't care, not right now. So instead, I nodded. My voice was calm, almost too calm, as I said, "If that's what you want." Vanessa smirked, mistaking my composure for surrender. She thought she had won. Daniel stayed silent, letting her bask in her hollow victory. Inside me, though, something shifted. It was like a door closing, sealing off the part of me that still hoped they would change. The pain was there, yes, but so was resolve. They could throw me out physically, but they would never control me again. I walked past them, every step echoing louder than the slap that had started it all. I didn't pack much, just a bag with some clothes, my old sketchbook, and a few photographs. I left behind the furniture, the dishes, the decorations, things I had bought, things I had cared for, things that no longer belonged to me. As I reached the front door, Vanessa called after me, her tone dripping with triumph. "Don't come back until you're ready to do the right thing." I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I simply opened the door and stepped out into the night. The air was cold, the sky heavy with clouds, but I felt strangely lighter, because they thought they were throwing me into the darkness. They had no idea I was already walking toward the light. The door shut behind me with a final thud, and as I walked down the quiet street with my small bag in hand, the memories began to surface like ghosts I couldn't shake. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the sting of what had just happened. For 63 years, I had lived with the belief that if I worked hard enough, if I sacrificed enough, my family would be secure. I was a nurse for 3 decades, and every day I poured myself into caring for strangers while holding nothing back from the people I loved at home. I had lost my husband when Daniel was just a boy, and in that moment I promised myself I would carry the weight for both of us. There were nights I came home so exhausted that I could barely lift my head from the pillow, but I still checked on Daniel, still made sure he had food for school, still found a way to smile so he wouldn't know how heavy the burden really was. I skipped vacations, wore old shoes until the soles wore thin, and worked double shifts through holidays, all to make sure he never felt the emptiness of poverty. When Daniel was in college, I sold our first home to pay tuition bills. I told him it was because I wanted something smaller, easier to manage. But the truth was, I couldn't bear to see him graduate with debt. I moved into a modest house, cozy and quiet, while I handed him the keys to the larger one. It was supposed to give him a start, a place to build a future. When Vanessa entered his life, I welcomed her with open arms. I wanted to believe she loved him for the same reasons I did, for his gentle heart, his curiosity, his laughter. But it didn't take long for me to notice her appetite for extravagance. Designer handbags, weekend getaways, expensive dinners, all things Daniel couldn't afford but somehow always ended up on my credit card or tucked into my bank statements. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Newlyweds. After all, sometimes stumbled while finding their footing. I thought I was helping, thought I was buying them time. But as the years passed, the requests never stopped. They grew bolder, more entitled. Just until next month. We'll pay you back soon. Those words became as hollow as the promises that carried them. And then, one night, I woke up at 2 a.m. with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers in my checkbook, and I realized I was draining myself for people who didn't see me as a person anymore. To them, I had become a resource, a bank, a safety net that required no gratitude. That night, I began to plan. It started quietly. I met with a realtor and discussed selling the big house. It was still under my name, legally mine, because I had never added Daniel to the deed. It felt almost cruel. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about cruelty. It was about survival, about reclaiming what I had built. Next, I visited my bank. I transferred my savings into a new account at a different branch, under a new trust I established with a lawyer's guidance. It was called a living trust, something I had heard about from a friend who had gone through a similar ordeal. In it, I placed not just my money, but my intentions. There was even a clause that protected me if anyone tried to claim I was incompetent or unfit to manage my affairs. Their share would be forfeited. It was a safeguard against manipulation, one I never imagined needing, yet now seemed essential. I moved quietly, making sure no paper trail was left in places they could easily find. Every appointment was scheduled during hours they thought I was at yoga or at a book club. I smiled through dinners with them, nodding when Vanessa rattled off her newest demands, while inside I counted down the days until my plan was complete. For 6 months, I lived with this secret. It was like carrying a stone in my pocket, heavy at first, but comforting as I reminded myself it was there, waiting. By the time Vanessa raised her hand to strike me, by the time Daniel turned his eyes away in shame or complicity, I was ready. Walking down that street with my small bag, I wasn't stepping into uncertainty. I was stepping into the life I had already chosen for myself. I had an apartment waiting, papers signed, accounts secured. Still, I couldn't deny the ache in my chest. Preparing for betrayal doesn't soften the blow when it finally lands. It only means you don't collapse under it. I stopped beneath a street lamp, the yellow glow bathing me in a circle of light. For a moment, I let myself breathe. My cheek still burned from Vanessa's slap, but deeper than that was the burn of realization. I had given too much of myself for too long. I thought of Daniel as a little boy, clutching my hand in a hospital waiting room, trusting me to make everything better. I thought of the nights I whispered promises into his sleeping ear, that I would always protect him, that he would never be alone. I had kept those promises, every single one, even when it nearly broke me. But tonight, he had chosen to stand against me. And yet, even through the hurt, a strange peace filled me, because I had finally chosen myself. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. Tomorrow, I would unlock the door to a place of my own. Tomorrow, I would wake without the weight of their demands pressing down on me. Tomorrow, I would begin again, not as the mother who gave until nothing was left, but as a woman who still had life worth living. The first morning in my new apartment felt strangely quiet. No footsteps rushing through the hallway, no voices demanding something from me before I had even poured my coffee. Just silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of pipes in the walls. It wasn't a large place, 2 small rooms and a balcony that overlooked a parking lot, but it was mine. Every corner, every shelf, every sound belonged to me. I set my coffee cup on the windowsill and let the early sunlight warm my face. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for someone else's approval. My cheek still carried the faint mark of Vanessa's slap, but here, surrounded by boxes, I had packed myself. The sting was replaced with something different: relief. Those first weeks were a test of my resolve. Old habits tugged at me. I caught myself glancing at my phone, expecting a call from Daniel asking for rent money, or Vanessa sending a link to some overpriced handbag with the words, "Can you cover this?" But the phone stayed silent. I reminded myself that the silence was not emptiness, it was freedom. I joined a local art class at the community center, something I had once promised myself I would do after retirement, but had never made time for. With a pencil in my hand, staring at a blank sheet of paper. I felt awkward at first, like a child learning to write. But slowly, the lines became shapes, the shapes became flowers, and soon I found myself sketching a daisy, the same flower Daniel used to pick for me when he was little. My hands trembled, but my heart steadied. That small drawing felt like reclaiming a part of myself I thought I had lost forever. Meanwhile, life was unraveling for Daniel and Vanessa. Word reached me through a mutual acquaintance who still lived in the old neighborhood. She told me the new owners had moved in, and Daniel and Vanessa had been forced into a cramped apartment across town. The glamorous parties Vanessa had boasted about never materialized. Without my financial support, their world shrank quickly. Daniel found work at a construction site, a far cry from the grand career he once claimed he would build. There was nothing wrong with honest labor. My own father had done the same, but I knew the weight of disappointment must have pressed heavily on him. Vanessa, unused to the idea of contributing, took shifts at a retail store. Their arguments grew louder, more frequent. I imagined the two of them in that small apartment, boxes piled high, resentment simmering between them. I shouldn't have cared, but I did. I was his mother, after all. My heart wanted to reach out, but my pride, my hard-earned boundaries, kept me still. One afternoon, as I left my art class, I passed by the grocery store. A young couple stood in the parking lot, arguing over whether they could afford a cart full of groceries. The woman's face was tight with frustration, the man's voice cracked with exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, I saw Daniel and Vanessa in their place, and the image pierced me. I pressed a hand against my chest and forced myself to keep walking. Their struggles were not mine to fix anymore. Time moved forward. The seasons shifted. In spring, I planted daisies on my balcony. In summer, I spent evenings on the park bench, sketching strangers as they passed by. In fall, I walked through streets lined with golden leaves, reminding myself that change, though painful, was natural. With every passing day, I felt less like the woman who had been slapped out of her own home and more like someone who had survived and chosen to live. But not all change came gently. The news reached me in winter. Vanessa had left. She packed her things one morning and never returned. Daniel was seen alone at the apartment complex, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. Some said she had found someone else, someone with deeper pockets. Others whispered she couldn't handle the reality of a life without endless luxuries. Either way, she was gone. When I heard this, I sat in my apartment, the letter clutched in my hand, and I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Part of me pitied him, the boy who had once clung to my hand in fear, now abandoned by the woman he had chosen over me. Another part of me hardened, reminding myself that he had made his choice, that betrayal had consequences. Still, I couldn't silence the ache. No matter how angry I was, no matter how justified my distance felt, he was my son. Blood doesn't vanish with betrayal. It lingers, binding even when it wounds. On a snowy evening, as I watched flakes drift down past my balcony, I whispered into the cold air, "Daniel, I hope you're learning. I hope you're finding your way." My words disappeared into the night, unheard, unanswered, but speaking them out loud was enough. It was my way of releasing the weight of anger, making space for something else, something softer, though still cautious. Because while Vanessa had struck me with her hand, Daniel had struck me with his silence. And silence, I had learned, could wound deeper than any slap. I closed the balcony door, poured myself a cup of tea, and returned to my sketchbook. On the page, a daisy bloomed beneath my pencil, fragile, simple, yet unbroken. Much like me. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old, and I never imagined the sharpest wound of my life would come from my own family. The sting of my daughter-in-law's hand still burned on my cheek as she glared at me across the living room. $50,000, she demanded. If you loved this family, you'd pay for my party. When I refused, she slapped me so hard I stumbled against the wall. My son, Daniel, stood silently at her side. He didn't protect me. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he said flatly, "We can always take the money from your accounts." That was the moment something inside me broke and something else came alive. They thought I was weak, but I had been preparing for this day. I was a nurse for 30 years. After my husband died young, I worked double shifts, sold our first home, and poured every dollar into raising Daniel. I gave him everything. When he married Vanessa, I even let them live in the big house I still owned, hoping it would give them stability, but the demands never stopped. The credit cards, the vacations, the luxuries, they drained me without shame. One night, staring at my checkbook, I realized I had become nothing more than their lifeline. So, in secret, I acted. I sold the house, transferred my savings into a new trust, and put protections in place so no one could claim I was incapable of managing my life. When Vanessa slapped me, I was ready. I walked out with nothing but a bag, leaving them to discover the house was no longer theirs and the accounts were empty. In my small new apartment, I found peace. I joined an art class, sketched flowers, and planted daisies on my balcony. Meanwhile, their world crumbled. Daniel took a labor job. Vanessa worked retail. Arguments tore through their marriage until she finally left, chasing a richer man. For months, I lived quietly, healing in my own way. Then, one spring afternoon, a letter arrived. Daniel's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. He simply wrote, "I know I failed you. I want to earn back your respect, not your money. If you're willing, meet me for lunch." We met at a diner. The silence between us was heavy, but when the check came, I looked at him and said softly, "Let's split the bill." His eyes met mine, filled with something I hadn't seen in years, humility, maybe hope. As we stood outside, he handed me a single daisy. "Thought you might like it," he murmured. I pressed the flower into my sketchbook, my heart trembling. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant setting boundaries, keeping my dignity, and allowing love to return slowly, cautiously. And for the first time in years, I believed I could have both, peace and family, but on my terms. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.